April 13, 2022. A Russian flagship, 500 sailors, state-of-the-art defenses, 2 Ukrainian missiles, and a cascade of fatal mistakes that turned unsinkable into underwater in 24 hours.
On April 13, 2022, in the Black Sea, a Russian guided missile cruiser cuts through the water. The Moskva, flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, 12,000 tons of Soviet engineering, 500 sailors aboard, armed with cannons, missiles, and radar systems designed to shoot down anything within 100 miles. The crew believes they're untouchable. They're wrong. At 8:42 p.m., 2 Ukrainian Neptune missiles scream toward the ship at nearly the speed of sound. The Moskva's radar operators don't see them coming. The defensive systems never activate. Within seconds, both missiles punch through the hull. Explosions tear through the engine room. Ammunition stores detonate. The ship erupts in flames. By dawn, the Moskva is gone, swallowed by the Black Sea. It's the largest Russian warship to be sunk in wartime since the end of World War II, and the first Russian flagship sunk since Knyaz Suvorov in 1905 during the Russo-Japanese War. USNI News. But here's what makes this story remarkable. The Moskva wasn't just sunk by Ukrainian ingenuity. It was sunk by Russian mistakes. A cascade of failures. A breakdown so complete that a ship designed to survive multiple missile strikes couldn't survive 2. This is the story of the Moskva, and how Russia's fatal mistakes turned their flagship into a tomb. To understand how the Moskva sank, you need to understand what the Moskva was. Built in 1979 in the Ukrainian city of Nikolaev, the Moskva was a Slava-class guided missile cruiser. At the time of its commissioning, it was one of the most powerful warships in the Soviet Navy. It displaced 12,490 tons and carried a crew of 510. USNI News. The ship's primary mission was air defense. It was equipped with S-300F long-range surface-to-air missiles, OSA-M point defense systems, and an array of radar and electronic warfare capabilities. On paper, the Moskva could track and destroy dozens of incoming threats simultaneously. But by 2022, the Moskva was aging. Its systems were outdated, and its crew, like much of the Russian Navy, relied heavily on conscripts with minimal training. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the Moskva became the command center for naval operations in the Black Sea. In February 2022, the Moskva left the port of Sevastopol to participate in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. USNI News. The ship gained notoriety on the war's first day. It sailed to Snake Island, a tiny Ukrainian outpost in the Black Sea, and radioed the garrison to surrender. The response became legendary. Russian warship, go fuck yourself. The Moskva bombarded the island. The garrison surrendered, but the moment became a symbol of Ukrainian defiance. For the next 6 weeks, the Moskva prowled the Black Sea, enforcing a naval blockade and providing air defense coverage for Russian amphibious operations. It was the most visible symbol of Russian naval power in the region. And then, on April 13th, everything went wrong. April 13th, 2022, evening. The Moskva is operating approximately 120 kilometers south of Odessa. Ukraine asserted it had sunk the ship with a pair of R-360 Neptune anti-ship missiles fired from a coastal battery east of Odessa. Naval News. But there's a problem. The Neptune's targeting radar has a maximum range of about 80 kilometers. The Moskva is well beyond that range. Under normal conditions, Ukraine shouldn't even be able to see the ship, let alone target it. But conditions that night are anything but normal. On 13 April 2022, northerly cyclonic winds swept warm and dry continental air over a moist, cooler boundary layer on the Black Sea. The resulting temperature inversion drew in low-level clouds along the line of sight between the radar and the warship. Naval News. The thick clouds create what's called an atmospheric duct. Radio waves bend. Radar signals travel farther. Suddenly, Ukraine's Mineral U radar can see targets it normally couldn't. And there, on the screen, is the Moskva. Ukrainian intelligence has been tracking the ship for days. According to the New York Times, U.S. and Ukrainian naval officers were on a routine intelligence sharing call when something unexpected appeared on their radar screens. The Americans said they had spotted the Moskva. USNI News. The Ukrainians thank their American counterparts. They excuse themselves from the call, and they start planning. The fatal mistake. Russia's radar was off. Here's where Russia made its first catastrophic error. The guided missile cruiser did not have its fire control radars activated and could not see the threat from the two sea-skimming weapons. Naval Today. Think about that. The Moskva is operating in a combat zone. It's within range of Ukrainian missiles, and its fire control radars, the systems designed to detect and intercept incoming threats, are turned off. Why? Retired Navy Captain Chris Carlson, who analyzed photographs of the wreckage, offers an explanation. If you look at the pictures of Moskva, when she's just dancing around going from place to place, or she's anchored as a showboat, those directors are all facing aft every time. Naval Today. In other words, the crew was complacent. They didn't believe they were under threat, and they didn't want to keep the radar systems running because it required alert and responsive operators. Danish military analyst Anders Puk Nielsen suggested that operator fatigue could have been a significant factor. Russian ships rely on rather old-fashioned systems that work well, but require operators who are alert and responsive. USNI News. But fatigue or not, the decision was fatal. The Ukrainian deception. Ukraine doesn't just fire the missiles blindly. They use a tactic straight out of a spy thriller. Following the initial strike, a telegram channel with ties to the Russian mercenary Wagner Group said the crew observed Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2s near the ship. Naval Today. Bayraktar drones. Turkey-made unmanned aerial vehicles that have become Ukraine's signature weapon. The drones appear on the Moskva's radar. The crew tracks them. Defensive systems focus on the aerial threat. And while the Russians are looking up, the Neptunes come in low. This is like Harpoon. It's a small missile. Its head weight is about 145 kilograms, travels less than 10 meters off the deck, and has radar homing. This is not, shall we say, a stressing threat for air defense systems. It's not supersonic. The Neptune isn't cutting edge. It's based on a 40-year-old Soviet design. The Moskva should be able to shoot it down easily, but the crew isn't watching for sea-skiving missiles. They're watching for drones. 8:42 p.m. Impact. The first known report of a missile hitting the ship was at 20:42, 13 April 2022, Ukrainian time. Both Neptune missiles strike the Moskva near its most vulnerable point, the ship's main propulsion spaces, dead center of the ship, just above the waterline. Naval Today. The warheads detonate. 145 kilograms of high explosives per missile. The blast tears through the engine room, destroying the crew's gas turbines and steam turbines. The ship loses power. Lights go out. Automated damage control systems fail. But the real disaster is just beginning. The fatal mistake. Terrible damage control. The Moskva is on fire. But it shouldn't sink. Not from two relatively small missile hits. The ship is huge. It has watertight compartments. It has firefighting systems. It has a crew of 500. But Russia made a second fatal mistake. The use of conscripts instead of mid-grade professionals and insufficient compartmentation have been suggested as contributing to the cruiser's sinking. USNI News. The crew panics. Damage control procedures break down. Fire spreads unchecked. And then the worst happens. The fire reached ammunition on board that exploded. USNI News. The Moskva's deck is loaded with weapons, anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles, ammunition for deck guns, all stored above deck, exposed to fire. When the ammunition cooks off, secondary explosions rip through the ship. The hull cracks. Water floods in. The Moskva lists heavily to port. Russia evacuates the crew. Russia said that 396 crew members had been evacuated, with 1 sailor killed and 27 missing, USNI News. But Ukrainian officials claimed that out of a complement of 510 crew members, only 58 had been rescued, USNI News. The truth is somewhere in between, but one thing is certain, the casualty toll is catastrophic. April 14, 2022. Dawn. Russian tugboats attempt to tow the burning hulk back to Sevastopol, but the damage is too severe. The hull is compromised. Water continues flooding in. After an attempt to tow it back to Sevastopol, the 12,490-ton Moskva sank on April 14, Army recognition. The pride of Russia's Black Sea fleet slips beneath the waves, and with it goes Russia's credibility. The sinking of the Moskva isn't just a military loss, it's a psychological catastrophe. As the flagship of Russia's Black Sea fleet, the Moskva was one of its most visible assets in the Ukraine war. Though Moscow carefully manages news about the war in Russia, it will be hard to hide the sudden absence of such a large ship, Army recognition. For Russia, the loss is humiliating. This is a ship that was supposed to dominate the Black Sea, a ship with state-of-the-art defenses, a ship commanded by experienced officers, and it was sunk by 2 Ukrainian missiles fired from a coastal battery. Both explanations for the sinking of the Moskva indicate possible Russian deficiencies, either poor air defenses or incredibly lax safety procedures and damage control on the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, analysts Mason Clark, Katerina Stepanenko, and George Barros at the Institute for the Study of War wrote, Army recognition. But the impact goes beyond morale. Moskva was the only warship in Russia's Black Sea Fleet with the S-300F missile system for long-range air defense. The ship did not itself fire missiles at land targets in Ukraine, but provided anti-aircraft support to vessels that did. The sinking prompted Russian ships, now less protected, to move further offshore, USNI News. Without the Moskva, the Russian Navy loses its air defense umbrella. Ships that were protected can now be targeted, and the planned amphibious assault on Odessa, a major objective of the invasion, becomes too dangerous to attempt. Retired U.S. Rear Admiral Samuel J. Cox, director of the Naval History and Heritage Command, told the New York Times that with the loss of the ship, any amphibious assault on Ukraine would be much more dangerous for Russia, with its landing and amphibious ships much more vulnerable to attacks, USNI News. The Russian Navy withdraws. Not completely, but significantly. Ships that once operated close to the Ukrainian coast now stay far out to sea, beyond the range of Ukrainian missiles. Ukraine, meanwhile, is emboldened. The Neptune's combat debut, sinking the largest warship to go down in combat since World War II, has already given it a place in history, Army recognition. The success of the Moskva strike becomes a template. Over the next 3 years, Ukraine develops an entire arsenal of sea drones and long-range missiles designed to hunt Russian ships. In early 2024, 6 sea drones powered by jet skis felled a Russian guided missile ship, the Ivanovets, Wikipedia. By 2025, Ukraine has steadily upgraded these sea drones, adding missile launchers and other weapons to expand their use. In January, sea drones in the Black Sea launched kamikaze drones that struck Russian Pantsir S-1 air defense systems, Al Jazeera. The Black Sea, once dominated by Russia, is now contested territory. And it all started with the Moskva. There's a lesson in the Moskva sinking, a lesson that military planners around the world are studying carefully. Modern warships are vulnerable, not just to advanced weapons, but to cheap, mass-produced missiles and drones that cost a fraction of what the ships themselves cost. The sinking will raise doubts about Russia's war-fighting abilities, whether it was due to enemy action or accident, army recognition. But more than that, it raises questions about naval warfare itself. If a 12,000-ton cruiser with state-of-the-art defenses can be sunk by 2 relatively simple missiles, what does that mean for the aircraft carriers, destroyers, and amphibious ships that modern navies rely upon? The United States is watching. So is China. In particular, analysts will be searching for any insight it might offer into any potential military conflict involving Taiwan. Taiwan has been acquiring anti-ship missiles similar to the Neptune. If war breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, will Chinese warships suffer the same fate as the Moskva? And what about American ships? The U.S. Navy operates some of the most advanced warships ever built. But advanced technology doesn't matter if the crew is complacent, if the radar is turned off, if damage control fails. The Moskva had everything it needed to survive: advanced sensors, layered defenses, a large, experienced crew. But it also had something else: complacency, fatigue, a belief that they were untouchable. And that's what killed them. On April 14, 2022, the Moskva sank beneath the Black Sea. 500 sailors went into the water. How many survived is still disputed. But what's not disputed is this: the Moskva didn't just sink because of Ukrainian missiles. It sank because Russia believed its own myth of invincibility, because the crew didn't take the threat seriously, because when the missiles came, the systems that could have saved them were turned off. In war, there are no unsinkable ships, only ships that haven't sunk yet. And the Moskva, it's gone, resting at the bottom of the Black Sea, a monument to complacency, a reminder that in modern warfare, one mistake can be fatal. And Russia made every mistake there was. This is the story of the Moskva, the flagship that fell, not because Ukraine was stronger, but because Russia forgot its first rule of war: never assume you're safe.